Welcome so much, Jim Harrington and Jim Crosby, to Friends Meeting of Austin's forum. We're really happy to have you here and yeah, to hear about sort of the nonviolent organizing here in Austin. So I guess I'll turn things over to you guys.
Yeah, I think that means turning it over to me for the introduction here. And by the way, I'm decked out in my Texas After Violence project colors today. Just thought I'd point that out. Jim, the two Jims and I were hiking in the Poor People's March a while back, and the two of them were talking behind me about, why don't we see if there's some kind of a need for a Highlander Center type organization in Austin to provide training to activists who are in nonviolent direct action and nonviolence generally, and cultural transformation like the original Highlander Center did in Tennessee. And, you know, then one of them said, hey, well, we wrote this guy in front of us into it. So the three of us started talking about it, and we decided to go around and interview some of, first of all, you know, our focus is on the young activists, the next generations. And our idea is to stimulate something, try to help something get started, and then vamoose. And, you know, let those leave, it's, you know, it's for those younger generations to do entirely. We started identifying some young activists to interview here in Austin with organizations like the Austin Justice Coalition and others, to see what their perception of needs were. And we asked them broad questions like that. We asked them also to identify other young activists who they thought we should talk to. So it kind of mushroomed like that. We go from one person to the next. We're still in the process. We've had, I think, 6 interviews at this point, and we have a few more that we want to do before we take any further steps. And you know, our goal in coming to you today is to sort of bring you into the conversation, maybe ask you some of the same questions, and see what kind of role, if any, the meeting might like to have in the project. I'm going to put up I think I'm going to put up a screen here with some of the responses that we got. And just a few quotes from the persons that we talked to. A good organization does not feed the oppressive systems that have historically oppressed the very people we seek to help. We don't have a centralized place where we can go to be trained to have the same mission, same core values, so that no matter where we are, whatever issues we're in, whatever conversation we're having, we all in this camp that fights for justice and equity can have the same principles and guiding forces, so we're all having the same conversation. No balls will be dropped. The world is moving so fast as well. We're not an efficient machine like the other side, which has had the privilege to build through their oppressive systems. Nonviolence is a loving thing. It's hard to practice. When you do practice it, the more power you hold. I don't think we have training on how to do that in this day and age. An Austin Highlander-like training entity, the Refugio Center for Community Organizing, was briefly and successfully tried in 2010. The Refugio Center taught a series of courses, including Intro to Capitalism, White Supremacy, Systems of Oppression, Designing Campaigns and Direct Action. 4 8-week trainings were held in the year. The most valuable Refugio trainings were in intersecting domination schemes, use of digital tools to maximize impact and coalition building. The Refugio Center ended due to lack of funding. There's a lot of siloing in the work. Some of it is understandable, some of it is harmful. There are all these areas of intersection, for example, intersections in homelessness and criminal justice. So many things lead to homelessness. So many things need to be dealt with in a more comprehensive way. Physical shared space would help people working on different issues with a shared analysis, uniting us strategically and practically. would help to actually achieve substantive change in different areas. It would be incredibly valuable. We all need to ask, what is the history of each issue in this place? How have groups responded to it? Why are we here? What are the radical notions of justice that might work? How do we combat the narratives that keep things as they are? Organizing the center would involve doing a district-wide education tour, talking about the idea, seeing where people would buy in. The community itself would need to build it out. We'd have community workshops. We'd ask community members, what would this look like for them? The more the community is involved, the better, rather than if we just say it's a good idea. How can we grow to be a less violent community? So many men talk ghetto to defend their honor. There's the incident of road rage a few weeks ago. Violence is the go-to option to settle conflicts. Men of color lash out. Micro and macro aggressions occur among Black and brown men. This needs to be addressed. Nonviolence is the moral binding that's needed. And so we've taken notes from each one of our interviews, and I drew together a list of needs that the activists were recognizing from all of those interviews, kind of just summarized here. And you can hear some of those needs reflected in the actual statements above. Transgeneral teamwork, exchange of information between younger and older generations of activists is critical. Eldering is needed just as much as education of the older generations in new perceptions. How true is that? Leadership and training in trauma awareness, leadership and training in active strategic nonviolence, leadership and training in community restorative justice processes. This came up over and over again, as might be reflected in this last comment up above. Great need for restorative justice processes, and also to replace the arrests and police processes, accompanied with mental health resources, conflict resolution within the community, within and between activist groups, leadership and training in community organizing on a neighborhood and street level, statewide reach and impact, mindfully including even focusing on rural Texas, ownership of a property to be shared with other organizations with similar vision, and leadership in exploring ways to keep the community safe without the police. First of all, I guess I'd like, well, before opening this up to y'all's thoughts, just want to be sure that y'all know the two Jims here. And Jim Harrington was the founder of the Texas Civil Rights Project, and is, has been a civil rights attorney all his adult career up until he decided to become a priest, and now is a priest at St. James Episcopal Church, which formerly occupied our building. And Jim has a deep history in fighting for civil rights issues all over the state, and I consider him a mentor, and very grateful to his life and his work. And Jim Crosby is an old-time, like decades-old friend, and we, I guess, sort of got started in our friendship together with the formation of the East Side Group, which was a Sojourners community here in Austin. We still meet, and Jim and I have worked on a ton of different projects over the years, and he, for a long time, was the theology religion teacher at St. Stephen's Episcopal School, and just recently has, been last, 2 years ago maybe, started Nonviolent Austin 3 years ago. And I don't know, I guess I'll just open it up now to thoughts from y'all.
For the first quote with the first page with all the quotes, I think the first one was about not supporting charity organizations that give back to institutions that fight the people we help. Did they provide examples of institutions that fit that bill?
I'll pull that comment up again.
Not that I remember. And I was going to add, you know, just for perspective, I think all 6 of those people we've interviewed so far would identify themselves as people of color.
You know what? I think I X'd out of my. I'm gonna have to go find my document again. Okay, there it is.
But
Get my stuff up on the screen.
I think at that point in the conversation, they weren't naming names.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. But I think that one of the issues that came up in our discussions was sometimes relationships between activists and universities or colleges, and the sort of different priorities that college professors have, academics, and you know, the sort of the binds that are on them. They are, I think, in the view of some of these young activists, a part of oppressive systems. The universities are. So that might have been something that was in the background of the comment. That's not to say, though, that I mean, like, there was a lot of discussion about forming a relationship with Houston Tillotson, for example, and we talked to a Houston Tillotson professor who is excited about it and thinks that there's a prospect of being able to work together with that university, and that would not, of course, that's a historically black college, and so it's not a part of the. I don't think it would be viewed as a part of the oppressive system.
Walter, I just came in, so I may have missed something, but has there been connection with Dr. Shirleen Kosripour at ACC for their Peace and Conflict Studies program? Because they have a 2-year degree and an active group there, which is pursuing issues like this. That's Austin Community College. Dr. Shirleen Kosripour is the director.
No, we have not had contact with her, nor the project.
Walter, I wonder, are you trying to create some history, or are you mostly trying to pull things together now? Because I was the director of the Austin Center for Peace and Justice for quite a while, and that doesn't. There are other people who are involved in that you might want to talk to. So, I did most of before I came to Austin, I did a lot of nonviolence work, but I also did nonviolence work with the Texas Conference of Churches and training in nonviolence through the church and society. So just, I don't know how that fits in, but didn't want to let those people, go. I don't know whether Don Bob is still alive. He's not. He died. Okay. Yeah, he was at Westminster, which is too bad. But he was a central person in the peace and justice work.
Yeah, I knew Don really well. It was, he was actually my youth pastor at one point.
That's cool.
And lovely human being. I think that a couple of things come to my mind. I'd like to ask the other gyms if they've got ideas too. But I'm thinking one thing that you touched on is something that was mentioned by at least one of our interviewees, which is the importance of eldering and the importance of connecting the generations that have done work on this. And so your input would be highly valued in that regard. The other thing that you touched on tangentially, I guess, is that we're, aiming to have this arise from the communities that most need it. And that's, not the enlightened white people, right? So, there's this tension there, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of interject some thoughts of our process. But first of all, I want to say thank you to the meeting for supporting the immigrants with whom I'm working. Your financial support's been very helpful, particularly since a number of the people I work with are undocumented and don't have any recourse to government benefits. So I'm very grateful to you all for what you've done, and assure you that it's been well used. So part of our thinking and methodology on this has been to concentrate, as Walter said, on communities that are generally communities of color and communities that are oppressed in our system, and to make sure in our conversations with folks that what we're proposing resonates with them and would be helpful in that organizing process. I think we're very cognizant. We know we come out of a different generation. We've done as best as we can with our work. And what we'd like to do is sort of contribute this idea that worked during the civil rights movement and during labor organizing with Highlander, and see if that resonates with people and how it would resonate. So we've been very conscious of meeting with particularly people in minority communities that are organizing. There are a lot of people doing a lot of things, and it's always really impressive to talk to folks about what they're doing. I mean, there's really amazing stuff going on. And one of the reasons, that we had talked to Houston Tillotson is because of trying to, how would it be established, this idea, and this is a question that we've raised with everybody that we've spoken with too. How do you see this functioning? How do we get it off the ground? And how do we devolve it, as Walter said, back into the community? This is not going to be our thing. It's an idea that we hope we can nourish, and it gets going. And part of that process of sort of where we are at this point in these interviews, and all of the interviews have been unanimous, as Walter's notes reflect, in the need for this kind of center, for sure. And where we are what we're looking at is, what are the mechanics that we move on to from here? How do we go about spinning this off? And some of the thoughts we've had have involved hiring a organizer for a period of a year to go through the process of raising money, bringing the community groups together, and how do we then find location for this person, and then what do we do after that year? And we've been, I think, very clear in our talking with and listening to people that all of this is a community process. So even going through that initial step of looking for an organizer involves the community, and that there would not be any particular structure at this point for a variety of reasons that come into play in organizing, but that there would be a participation in pulling it together, participation in selecting who comes on board, and a lot of participation. So we talked about some of those mechanisms. That's sort of where we are. I think we bend over backwards to make sure that we honor what's been done, but that we're really looking at what needs to happen, you know, as we go forward. And this may be a legacy in the sense that we can leave, you know, to the help pull things together. And I think we've been really clear too in trying to look at this not as an Austin thing. You know, of course, this is happening in Austin where the activity is, but it's very important, I think, that this be seen, if it gets off the ground, that this be seen as a organizing nonviolent center for the people of Texas. And that includes, you know, the rural areas in particular, and community minority areas as well, such as the Valley or El Paso or wherever. So anyway, I just want to throw those thoughts out about the process we've been involved in and where we are at this particular point and what we're looking at going toward in the future. And we appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and hopefully walk in partnership with you all on this process.
This is Jim Coon. I have two questions. One about a possible group to ally with or reach out to that you may or may not have already reached out to, and that's Undoing White Supremacy Austin. Some of the questions that have been raised about the white savior complex, they've been working on in allyship for some years and might be helpful. The other question I have is I'm sure you all are aware of the East Point Peace Academy in Oakland that are doing this kind of work right now, and they've got something that they've set up called the Yet to Be Named Network, which they envision as a national network of pods of 3 to 5 people who are going to be kind of activated in nonviolent direct action. And one of the things that I really like about their kind of plan is its emphasis on what they call radical vulnerability. In participating in a couple of the trainings that they gave prior to the election, I was really struck by how heartfelt everyone was, and how, you know, from the heart, very, very trauma informed, very, very much a kind of a empathetic kind of perspective that they had. And it just made the educational piece of it so much easier, to know that you're gathered with humans who are not presenting themselves as experts, not necessarily, you know, letting everyone bring their full selves. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I'll drop a couple links into the chat.
You know, Jim, that's a good point. I wanted to mention too that one of the things that we have done with everybody we've interviewed is to make sure they would be part of that teaching process, right? So that this would be a community effort that people have input into as well as take from. You know, I think it's, but making sure that it doesn't become a particular group's arm, right? But that every group participates in this, either in the directorship or in the actual classes. Like one of the things that Walter put up that was, I thought, very informative is that there were these 8-week sessions, for example, and that different people have committed to be part of that process. So that would be a very wide spectrum, I think, of people that would be brought into this process without themselves having to take it over and control it and run it. So thank you for bringing that up. That is an important part of our consideration.
I just want to say I appreciate the mindfulness that's going into this. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. mindfulness that you're putting into this. The thing I see that fails so often with good intentions is, just pouring all your heart and soul into something in action, in making it the big goal happen today and not maybe in 3 days, whatever it takes to get there. But the mindfulness is really touching me, what you got, and it sounds very very positive. I'm hoping that we could be a part of something like this. I guess I'd like to hear, I'm not familiar with that program that was in Tennessee. I should know it, but I don't. And the other one that was brought up, the Refugio. I'm not familiar with either one, and it'd just be nice to hear a little bit of history of those two to see where you get your thoughts from. Thanks.
I'll start if y'all want me to. My familiarity with the Highlander Center, I guess I think it was an autobiography basically of the founder, Miles Horton, a number of years ago. And then I was reminded of it back early this year when I was reading one of John Lewis's books, and he talked about Rosa Parks being trained in nonviolence there before the whole December 1955 bus incident. But if I remember correctly, Miles Horton had visited some Scandinavian countries and seen what they had in the way of folk schools there and wanted to start something like that in Tennessee. And it began in the 30s, I think. So during the Depression, mainly designed for labor organizing. By the mid 50s, it was also host to nonviolence trainings for civil rights groups, and hence Rosa Parks training there and others. And so just conjuring the names of Rosa Parks and John Lewis and MLK and that combination of labor organizing and then this nonviolent and civil rights emphasis. And you can Google them, and they carry on to this day. They've done a lot of work with kind of cooperatives and in the historic South, working with people of color, especially human rights and civil rights and economic development. So, and as far as the Refugio Center, I'll let Walter or Jim take that. I'm in the dark too, pretty much.
I'm going to let Walter talk about Refugio Center. Since what I wanted to add to what Jim said, I don't remember the name of the movie, but one of the civil rights movies within the last 2 or 3 years really focused partly on the training that went on at Highlander and the training in nonviolence. And if you've seen the movie, you remember there's this scene on that training where people are getting spit on and yelled at, everything they're going to experience as they're out on the line. And using that as part of that vehicle to teach about nonviolence. I think what struck me was that it's quite often we talk about this as a philosophical idea, spiritual idea, but the real training, is like John Lewis said, how do I look at that trooper that's beating me, not resist him and still love him? And that I thought that was very poignantly put in the movie, and really talks about the depth of the need to understand and practice real nonviolence. And you could see, I think, from our interviews that there was a commitment to nonviolence, but there was some question about how it works and what's the depth of it and what should it be. And I think this is the soul that Highlander helps bring to these various movements that are going on. And so I think with those comments, I'll pass it off to Walter to talk about Refugio.
I just want to ask, what was the name of the movie?
I really don't remember, and I tried to Google it last night and it didn't show up. It had all of these young civil rights workers in it, but there were like 3 movies, as I recall, right? And I don't remember. I am so sorry. And I did look for it, and I should have remembered, but it's.
I think it was called The Butler. It's part of The Butler.
The Butler.
Yeah, I mean, most of the movie focused on a butler who works at the White House, but his son was involved in Ella Baker, SNCC, and they were being spit on. They were showing how they were trained.
Mm-hmm.
Another bit of that footage, I don't think it's so much on Highlander, but the training that was in Nashville before the sit-ins that especially James Lawson led is real well documented in one of the half-hour segments of A Force More Powerful. I think they did 6 documentaries to go along with that book. And that was a PBS series, I guess, but Force More Powerful, the Nashville segment really shows some of that training too. And it's pretty graphic and amazing.
The Refugio Center was initiated by, I think, at least in part by Eric Tang, who's a professor at UT, who was also instrumental in providing some guidance to the Texas After Violence Project when it started in 2007, or the years shortly thereafter. And according to our source on this, Eric is, got tenure at UT after this and has been focused on more on academic work than community organizing directly, as he was then. And he had an office in a building over on East 11th Street that UT owned. And the Refugio Center met there, and they had that kind of 8-week training program on those different subjects that were listed in the handout that I posted earlier. And they had two organizers, and one of them has since moved to North Carolina, and the other one is Paula Rojas, who, as I understand it, is now associated with Mama Sana. And we have yet to interview her, but I think hope to. So we'll find out more from her about all that. We've heard that she's just a great source of information on activism, and even perhaps especially within the Hispanic community. Apparently it was kind of a huge success. They had like maybe 20 students at a time, and some good training, but they didn't last because they didn't have a plan for sustainability or for financing, for that matter. So I think they were running on donations, that were given through events and things like that, but they weren't able to keep it going.
I have a copy of A Force More Powerful, the book, if somebody wants to borrow it. And I think the meeting owns the not the DVD, but what preceded DVDs?
VCR.
VCR.
What would you play it on?
I don't know, but anyhow, I know that was the medium at the time. So, Gallia, if you're interested, the book is I can loan you the book.
If I can find this.
Got a very good section on the civil rights.
And State Stevens, last I knew, had a set of the DVDs, so I might can steal those back at some point if we need them.
That might be a good thing for us to do as a forum, pieces of it. So.
I'm just curious, hearing what happened with the Refugio Center, is there a vision for how sort of financing and sustainability might work for the center?
Well, that's part of the reason we're here, James. So we have thought about maybe working out an arrangement to share the house that you all have, the office that you all have with, I'm not sure the name of the Austin Sin Fronteras or whatever.
Austin Tan Cerca.
Okay, Tan Cerca, that you currently have, maybe looking at that as a place. I think that the fundraising is going to be a bit tricky because everybody's always looking at the same pot in a sense for this kind of work. And that's why it seems to me that we really have to plan on that, having somebody on the ground for at least a year before we really start moving. Somebody has to meet with all the community groups that we've visited again, kind of bring them together in consensus, and I think find money, frankly, possibilities, and even find money to support that person during that year. So it's all tricky. It's all tricky at this point.
And, in raising the question of the little house, I mean, we talked to Howard briefly about that. It's just an idea. And because it's our understanding that Austin Town Circa isn't using the house a whole lot right now. And we're not thinking about the house as a meeting place for bringing community groups together or something large like that, but just as having a space where the community organizer in that first year could, inhabit and work out of. And we are curious, I guess, if that person were to need to hold larger meetings, whether the meeting house itself could be available for that.
Walter,
I found the DVD, Force More Powerful. So I actually have a copy, and that means the meeting has a copy. So if you want me to bring it up to you, Gally, I'll be happy to.
and it turns out it's also available on YouTube. I'm not sure if it's the whole thing, but most of it is on the ICNC channel. That's the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict. And I just put the URL in the chat. And, if you don't remember the URL, it's the YouTube/user nonviolent conflict.
Walter, I can't, of course, speak for the entire board of Austin Town Circa, but it has, we have been aware of this for, since I think you and I talked. So it was discussed at our last board meeting, and I think it'd be worth pursuing a little bit more if there's some interest in that space. Austin Town Circa would definitely be open to talking about that.
Where is all that noise coming from?
What did you say, Walter?
So maybe I okay, I'm going to silence myself and see what happens. I might have. It's not me.
What's the problem, Walter?
I'm hearing a bunch of noise. You guys don't hear it?
No.
Really?
It's the angels. It's your
I
better
hear it.
angels, Walter. It's your better angels talking to you.
Something up on one of my screens.
Yeah, I hear it.
This is Renee. I was wondering if this nonviolent training could in some way dovetail or go along with the nonviolence training that we've done at the meeting house. Alternatives to violence. I'm sorry, alternatives to violence training.
I think the idea is to be absolutely as inclusive as possible. And that even in what we're talking about, the different training sessions, they're going to be inclusive and no rigidity and no necessary, and each one I think would probably have a different emphasis and impact. So, and this is sort of where I was trying to go with Jim's questions too, was that to bring everybody into this to offer their expertise and insights. So, but it is to create a presentation, I think, as training and in a different context than what we've done it in the past. And also, I think what we really want to do is make sure we're moving it into minority community. A lot of us have done stuff that hasn't been in the minority communities themselves, whether it's organizing goes on that we want to strengthen. So I think there's a real consciousness of our effort to try to do that.
This is Renee again. I have not taken that training. My daughter April did, and I know other people have, and I'm wondering what some of the people who have taken the alternative to violence training thinks about that in conjunction with the nonviolence type thing. Is anyone here taking the alternative to violence training?
I have, and I think Walter took some of them, didn't you? Way back, and Liz is very familiar with them, and
Liz is a trainer.
Yeah, I'm a trainer, and I know the whole system in Texas, AVP Texas, and we could get them in here doing that work. They do the work with people all over the world, and there's real sensitivity to the issues of inclusiveness at this point in that. It also includes trauma training at this point, which I think is very important for a lot of people. And it's been very well developed. And anytime we would like to have a group come and do it, there are people in, Glenn is also a trainer, but there are people in Houston and in Dallas who can make up a team. Just have to let me know that you know, we can call on them in our own yearly meeting, and that would be inclusive of everybody. I mean, you don't have to be a Quaker to take alternatives to violence training. It started out in the prisons, but it really comes out of the civil rights movement originally, and the work that was done in nonviolence. It's a matter of developing a way. The whole technique started in Buffalo with the police, and then went into a New York State prison and was developed in the prisons to give prisoners, especially people who are going to be there a long time, a chance to understand nonviolence. And it's just amazing what happens when you train people in the prisons, because it just opens their eyes to ways to be with each other without violence that they're dealing with every day in the prisons, especially someplace like Texas. It's a really good training. Anyway, we have access to that, and I'd be very happy to get you in touch with the person who's heading that up right now, Kevin King, who many of you know. So he's in Houston.
Liz, from what you said, it sounds like they cater to the situation, as in people in prison or people on a picket protesting, and what I've thought of for a long time, and I didn't realize you were a trainer, was taking it into elementary schools and middle schools. So is there, do they sort of cater to the group?
There's two specific programs, one for high school level and another for elementary level, that I have trained in the elementary level with kids as young as preschool kids. And I did this for years, since 1970s. So, and I haven't done it much when I've been in Austin, but I'd be ready to go back and try and get it started. Again, but there just hasn't been the chance to do this. Yes, there is. And one of the biggest successes I feel that I have been part of in Austin was training young people in our meeting. That's when April took the training. So was it April or Nikki that took the training? I don't really remember.
It was April.
That was April, but it just sounds like something that would be, if we started with the younger people, by the time they got into the older groups that we're talking about here today, they'd have a really good foundation in nonviolence.
That's true. It's very similar to what the FOR, the work that they were doing in nonviolence for their Fellowship of Reconciliation, and I did their training too. So I became one of their trainers as well. So you know, anyway, the Methodists have done some of this work also within in Texas. So, but not a lot to the communities that you're talking about, because I think the point is, I think you're going about it all right and figuring out how what they want, not what we think they want. Of course, AVP is largely done with people of color because that's who is in our prisons and jails. It's largely done with people of color.
And that was what was where the trauma healing came in, was through AVP in Rwanda with the Hutsis and the Tutsis, or the Tutsis and the, I can't remember the other name.
Hutus
and Tutsis. That's a lot of the trauma healing stuff came there, and is now gone into like Colombia and some of the other Central American AVP programs. One thing that I thought of, just kind of out of the blue, I don't know how much it would relate, but our friend Susan is so active in non-military options for youth that some kind of partnering with that group might be useful, since they are in the high schools a lot to talk about other ways to serve, and this might be a good connection to have.
Susan Van Heitzman, I think.
Yes.
Probably both Jims know her.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. I see their Facebook posts together.
So I'd like to hear more about the possibility of us participating as a group in, or what you'd like to see from us as a group in the formation of something like this new center.
Go for it, Walter. This is
Well,
taking your leadership.
I was part of the group, so I might defer to you, Jim. I mean, we have the little house, we have the big house for, meetings off and on in the evenings or something. We have some monetary resources, and we've got a ton of what's the right word? Well, goodwill toward this type of thing, plus experience. So
yeah,
I think we're looking for what the meeting itself would, we're looking for input in terms of certainly how, as some of what we've gotten just now, is what the project might look like. A lot of filling in with AVP and stuff like that. And, looking for just brainstorming along those lines, as well as meeting, considering how it might use its resources to help.
I think we're looking probably at $80,000 to $100,000 for that first year, depending on support, ancillary support in terms of office space and that kind of stuff. You'd probably have to bring somebody in salary wise, I would guess around 40, maybe 50 these days. So, I mean, that's part of our agenda, I think, is also that we're going to have to raise some funds for that first year. And I think it's very important to me, at least, to do this incrementally, is to spend that year finding a good organizer and spending that year building that up and finding additional financial support. Because a lot of this all ultimately has to come from the community, right? We have to be planted in the community and take guidance from the community and offer our feedback to the community. So it's a process that cannot happen overnight, and nor should it happen overnight.
And in the meantime, it strikes me that those of y'all who are expressing the interest, you've got Liz, you've got Glenna, and we Nonviolent Austin, I guess 2 years ago, the fall of 2019, in y'all's meeting space in the parish hall, we had 5 Saturday afternoon nonviolence trainings, informal. It wasn't AVP officially, but similar stuff, and y'all could do and host that for each other, and gain some of this kind of knowledge, experience, and momentum to be engaged in this as we develop this. In other
I
words,
just want to say, I guess I'm mindful that we're at just about 10:50, a little after, so we should probably take a little break before meeting for worship. But I so appreciate the work that you're doing, Walter, Jim Cosby, and Jim Harrington, and thank you so much for speaking with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Just quickly, where should we stay tuned to see further, well, to see, what are the themes from next week's show?
What are the themes from next week's show?
Yeah, what's going to happen going forward?
The Jims and I need to meet on that, I think, but I think some of the things we have left are to talk to a few more people, and including, I think, maybe Houston Tillotson, because I'm not sure when we're going to do that, but we want to determine if there are resources there. We've heard that the president of the university would be open to this, and we just don't know how or when to approach that. Then I guess we've got to figure out. I think we still have a little bit more interviewing to do and thinking before we figure out what the next step is in terms of finding an organizer. What about you, Jim Crosby? You got any input on that?
Yeah, I just think Walter is your liaison there, but like I say, I think we've now included y'all in it, so consider yourselves part of the planning, and like I say, whatever you want to do in terms of diving in. Walter's got the ongoing his work, especially with the Texas After Violence Project. Nonviolent Austin, Liz and Walter have been involved with, as well as Joanna and different ones, and Erica weighs in on Facebook with some frequency and regularity. And so just, these things we've got ongoing, and y'all can certainly dive into them. But like I say, I think y'all have the resources in-house to take on nonviolence training, of yourselves first and foremost, and then, opening it up to the broader community. And so, I think we can move forward on all fronts in a sense.
That's a really good point. I think that we're certainly making a lot of contacts in the process of our interviewing here that can be bridges to alternatives to violence training occurring in a variety of organizations. So